Welcome to The Sweat. I'm your host, Jesse Cofield. Lots to get to on today's show. So we got NBA, we got NFL. Obviously, it's March. We got more college basketball to get to. Plus, we are breaking down UFC 272. That's going to be fun. But we're starting with hockey, okay? So say hello to NHL.com's Fantasy on Ice podcast host, Pete Jensen, and our RotoWire duo, Paul Bruno and AJ Scholz. Fellas, breaking down tonight's best DFS plays. It's a 9-game slate. So, Pete, who are you going to pay up for at center?
Well, I'm going to make sure I get Josh Norris into my lineup from the Ottawa Senators because he's expected to return to the lineup from a shoulder injury, moderately priced, but I'm spending for it because it's $5,300 and you could still have a lot of leeway on the rest of your lineup. So despite being limited to 36 games out of Ottawa's 52 this season, Norris leads the Senators in goals, plays with Brady Tkachuk, leads them in power play goals. And they're not going to have Drake Batherson on the right side of that line, but I think it's going to give an already sneaky offense in Ottawa even more DFS appeal. Season long is a different story, but DFS, they have high potential any given night, even against elite opponents. We've seen it with some of their victories this year. And Florida right now is allowing a bunch of goals over their past few games, 3 straight losses with a combined 16 goals allowed for the Panthers.
All right, Paul, what's your strategy here? Are you going to pay up for center 2 guys over $9K, McKinnon and McDavid?
I'm not going to pay for those guys, but I will pay for Alex Barkov. Pete alluded to the fact that Florida's been floundering the last 3 games, but I think that slide ends tonight with the matchup against Ottawa at home. Florida's been awesome at home much of the season. And for his part, he's got 15 points and 40 shots on goal in his last 10 games. So I think I'll buy that for $8,900. Other choices at center that I like cost a lot less. Elias Lindholm, $6,100 hosting Montreal. Yes, please. And JT Miller, $6,000 at the Island. I think that's interesting too. These are 2 good centers that have been scoring very regularly, and they're discounted tonight.
All right, AJ, what's your strategy at center?
Well, I think it's to start with what these guys talked about in Lindholm or Norris. Use one of those guys because that's going to give you the ability to pay up for Nathan McKinnon here. $9K is expensive, but the Avs are facing Arizona, who's not anything to speak of in terms of competition for them. McKinnon's on an 8-game point streak that includes 7 goals over that stretch. And the power play has struggled for Colorado of late. I think matching up with Arizona is a good chance for them to get out of that funk. And Nathan McKinnon will be crucial to doing that.
All right, let's move to the wing here. Which guy do you need in your lineup, Paul?
Well, I think it's going to be points night for Florida, so I'm going to go with Jonathan Huberdeau. That power play is going to go nuts, I think, against Ottawa this evening. So I want to add at least one of those 2 guys. He costs $7,300 if you're afraid of Barkov's higher price. And then I like 2 other wingers that are also scoring a ton and less than $7,000. Kirill Kaprizov for Minnesota has a tasty matchup at Philadelphia, 16 points and 39 shots on goal in his last 10 games, translating to almost 15 DraftKings points per night. So that's a good bargain. And Johnny Gaudreau, one of the hottest shooters in hockey all season long, $6,600 for home date against Montreal. And we know they got lit up for 8 goals last time out, didn't they?
All right, AJ, where are you going on the wing?
I'm going to stick with Colorado here and go with Gabriel Landeskog. Look, I know 5-on-5, they've moved him off that McKinnon-Rantanen line, but he's still managed to produce here. He's not going to cost as much as the higher-priced wingers on this slate. And the fact of the matter is, again, that power play could erupt at any point here, and he's going to be on the number 1 group with McKinnon and Rantanen. So I'm not as concerned about him not being on the top line. If you want that top line share, I do think Andre Burakovsky at 4,100 makes some sense as well. You know, anybody playing with McKinnon and Rantanen is a viable play in my opinion.
All right, Pete, where are you going on the wing?
I'm going with Brian Rust for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I know that's AJ's group, but he'll probably back me on that. He's worth spending up for in DFS on this matchup, even against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So on the road, so 7,400 in DraftKings. That's a price to pay, but I mean, this guy is borderline top 10 in the NHL in goals per game and also points per game. He's been amazing with Crosby and with Gensel. So, and he's with those guys on the first power play as well. So Russ scored a goal on opening night with 3 shots on goal against the Bolts. So yeah, I will build my lineup around Brian Rust. I think he's one of the most underrated goal scorers and point producers in the entire league this season.
All right, let's move on down to the D line. AJ, where are you going here?
Well, with defensemen, I really like to try and target players with a solid floor. Like there are a handful of guys that will score every night, but it's only a couple of guys. So when you look at shot totals, Darnell Nurse, who comes in at 5,800 on tonight's slate, is second in the league in shots over the last month. Yes, he has just 1 point in his last 6 contests, but again, those shot and block totals just make him look like a viable option here, especially when you're not paying like Chris Letang prices at 6,900. If you're going to use Letang, he's got to get a point, right? You can maybe get by and justify at 5,800 Darnell Nurse having just a high shot, high block total and getting you those 4 points in this one.
All right, what do we think, Pete? Where are you going on the D line?
I'm really encouraged by what I've seen from Jacob Chikrin for the Coyotes over the past couple of games, back-to-back multi-point games. Had an assist with a couple of shots and a couple of blocks when the Coyotes beat the Avalanche in a shootout on February 1st. And we all know, right, the direction the Coyotes right now in terms of probably going to sell some players at the deadline. The biggest asset they have is not an expiring contract. It's Jacob Chikrin. So he's playing to boost his trade stock. He's had a miserable season in terms of living up to his top 15, top 20 fantasy expectations at the defenseman position from last year when he was an elite goal scorer at the position and everything else across the board. The Coyotes have less talent around them, even in a difficult matchup against the Avalanche. I think he's worth spending up for in the $5,000 range at a scarce position, and he'll get you the category coverage, even if they get blown out in this game, I think.
All right, Paul, what are we doing here on defense?
Well, I like the calls that the boys have made here in the position. So I'm only going to add a couple other options for people to think about. If you go high end and want to continue that Florida stack that I've been touting, I don't know how you avoid not including Aaron Ekblad. 10 points and 33 shots in his last 10 games played, even throws out a lot of blocks. So that's why his DraftKings point total is averaging around 14.5 in his last 10 starts. And you can't fade Cale Makar if you got room for him. Another 14 points in his last 10 games played, all assists, but who cares? They still count. And he's got the nice matchup against Arizona. If you're looking for a bit of a contrarian play, go a little bit lower and take a look at Noah Dobson. He's an unheralded guy on the Islanders defense, 8 points and 29 shots on goal for him. And he's hosting Vancouver tonight. A favorable matchup, I think, for the Isles.
All right, let's talk some savings, guys. Pete, where can you save money? Like, who's the value play tonight in DFS?
I think it's Elias Pettersson because the Islanders are not some team that I would be afraid of, in terms of rostering the opposing offense, even though Sorokin's been great. They allow 3+ goals plenty of times during their recent up and down play. And Pettersson, if you haven't been paying attention, I know the Canucks haven't lived up to my expectations of them being a fringe playoff team. They're a little bit outside the mix right now, but Pettersson's turned it around. 21 points in his past 18 games with 7 multi-point games in the span. So especially with the Islanders have been a subpar home team this year, for that price point, Elias Pettersson, I think, should be in everybody's lineup tonight.
All right, Paul, give us some value.
There's a lot of harmony on the group today. I love the call on Elias Pettersson. He was first on my list as well, but I'll give you 2 more to think about. Matt Boldy made me look good about a week or so ago. My no longer secret weapon. He's got 18 points in 20 games played so far this season, and averaging over 11 DraftKings points, only costing $4,900. It's a very favorable matchup against Philadelphia and the struggling Flyers. And I like Andrew Mangiapane. He just continues to score, and he's on a heater right now with 8 goals and 11 points in his last 10 games, also averaging 14 DraftKings points per game, and he faces Montreal while only costing $4,700. He likes playing the Canadiens and has done well against them in his history.
All right, AJ, take us home with some value.
Yeah, I think targeting anything you can get out of Calgary tonight makes a lot of sense here. I'll toss in Michael Backlund at 3,400. Solid value for a top 6 player. If for some reason you want another option other than stacking Calgary, it's a bit of a high-risk play. No confirmation that he's going to 100% play, but Anthony Mantha is trending in the right direction, that he'll be back from a shoulder injury tonight. He's 3,400, going to slot into the second line if he does play. He'll be on the number 2 power play unit, so you're getting a share of the Caps top 6 there. for less than 4K. And I think that's a good spot to be in, even though he's been out for a long time with that shoulder issue.